Hey everybody, it's Overkill here with another episode in the Total War Warhammer Future Factions series. So today we are talking about the one, the only, the Lizardmen. So thank you guys for watching the series so far. I do this little thank you intro every time, but I do want to thank you all because a lot of you are new and some of you maybe have only watched one video, sometimes you haven't watched the other ones, but if you haven't watched the other ones, I do recommend that you go and watch them if the factions interest you because yeah, all the factions in Warhammer are really cool. But today we're talking about the Lizardmen. And the cold-blooded Lizardmen are the oldest nation of the Warhammer world. And they serve the enigmatic old ones. They're a tongue twister for me, apparently. Most of the Lizardmen dwell in the southern part of the New World known as Lustria, a tropical continent which is mostly covered in jungles and dotted with the monolithic temple cities of the Lizardmen. The Lizardmen are not a singular race, but four. By the way, we're talking about the characteristics. The powerful enigmatic I can't say that word. Enigma, whatever. The Slan, the disciplined warlike Saurus, the clever and agile Skinks, and the large brutish Croc Gar. Lizardmen do not reproduce. Rather, they are birthed from spawning pools in their temple cities as full-grown adults, and they are given instinctual knowledge to fill their slot in society, basically. So Slan know, even though, well, actually, okay, we'll get into that. Slan aren't born anymore, but we'll get into that. Slan know to be great mages and priests and stuff. Saurus know to be warriors. Skinks know to be just the general population, essentially, of the Lizardmen. And Croc Gars are, you know, the big brutes that do everything else, basically. On the battlefield, cohorts of Saurus warriors and Skinks form the body of most Lizardmen armies, backed up by monstrous Croc Gars, huge monsters, and without a doubt the most powerful magic users in the universe in the form of the Slan priests. As mentioned earlier, the Lizardmen serve the Slan, who in turn serve the Old Ones, a race of godlike beings who created many of the races in the Warhammer world. The Old Ones had direct contact with the first spawn Slan, who then passed information to the four younger generations. But after the polar warp gates collapsed and chaos was unleashed on the world, they disappeared, and the first spawn perished, and no new Slan have been spawned since the event centuries ago. The Lizardmen are attempting to complete the Old Ones' great plan, which was how they believed the world should be, which began with splitting the world into new and old, and creating various races such as the Lizardmen, elves, dwarfs, humans, ogres, and halflings. After the release of Chaos and the loss of the Old Ones, it is impossible to complete the Great Plan without the extinction of all the Chaos races. A quick note, Chaos is the direct foe of the Lizardmen as they are polar opposites, where Lizardmen are trying to make the world whole, and not peaceful, I suppose, but, you know, in their vision, whereas Chaos are trying to destroy everything, so they're quite polar opposites, but Skaven nearly take the top spot for the most hated adversary because of just the never-ending bitter war that's been going on in Lustria between the Skaven and the Lizardmen. Now, as we mentioned, the Lizardmen live in the continent Lustria, which is part of the New World, which you'll see now, south of Nagaroth, which is the land of the Dark Elves, and you can see it's basically North and South America. We'll just say that now. Lustria's primary mountain range is the Spine of Sotek, a range of volcanic mountains that runs parallel to the west coast of Lustria. Along the coast west of the mountains is the narrow Copper Desert, while dense jungles dominate the lands east of the mountains. The southern region of Lustria is the Kulchin Plains, an expansive region of grassland plains. And the Lustrian capital is Itza, although it is outshone by Hexoatl, which is the residence of the oldest living Slan, Lord Maz Mundy, which is the oldest of the second generation, which again would make him the oldest living Slan, essentially. So, for society, just like their hated foe, the Skaven, they work in a caste system due to their empire being comprised of four races. The ancient Slan are the absolute rulers and mage priests of the Lizardmen, as they were the servants of the Old Ones. The other races are fanatically loyal to them, laying down their lives to protect them in battle. The Slan spend centuries in meditation and only come out if needed in times of war. The Saurus are the warrior class. They possess thick scales which act as their armor. They spend all their lives training and fight in tight formations. And just to add on, it seems that they live forever because there's no record of a Saurus ever dying of old age. The Skinks serve as the artisans and bureaucrats of the Lizardmen Empire. Since the Slan are nearly always in meditation, the Skinks usually run Lizardmen society. In wartime, Skinks support the Saurus legions as auxiliary forces. A second breed of the skinks, known as chameleon skinks, are excellent scouts and can cloak themselves to near invisibility. Finally, the Croxagores do most of the heavy lifting and labor in society. While quite stupid, they are very loyal and responsible for laying the stones of the Lizardmen temple cities. At war, they are shock troops. They resemble an ogre or troll in size. So for the religion of the Lizardmen, they worship the Old Ones, as we mentioned. The Old Ones were an ancient, hyper-intelligent, and near-omnipotent starfaring species that may have been reptilian in nature, and who served as the mysterious shaping hand of the world, creating its current geography and climate, as well as the new sentient races to inhabit it, including the Slan and Lizardmen, elves, dwarfs, men, ogres, and halflings. Now, the Old Ones are very important to the Lizardmen. After the disappearance, as the Slan withdrew into their own cerebral worlds, the skink priests, the most intelligent of their kind, became the daily leaders of the Lizardmen. It was their ceaseless industry that restored the temple cities, rebuilding everything for which they had architectural plans. It was they who ordered the overgrown jungle cut back to develop the roads between the temple cities. And so over the years, the Lizardmen, once the most advanced civilization to walk the world, regressed into a primitive state. The Old Ones took on the aspect of distant gods, worshipped by the Lizardmen and called upon in times of need by the Skinks. They began to make bloody sacrifices to attract the attention of their missing gods. The relics that they collected upon the orders of the Slan were held in wonder. All hope of understanding the technology of their function lost, replaced with superstitious ceremony and ritual. While superstitious acts have gained in popularity since the loss of the Old Ones, these were taken to horrific new levels with the coming of the new god Sotek. Inspired by Tenten, skink priests led the ritualistic slaughter of untold thousands of rat men. These Skaven were sacrificed in horrific fashion, sometimes thrown alive into writhing pits of serpents, other times split open and choice organs offered to the heavens. If the Skavener was lucky, he was simply beheaded by a Saurus executioner. It is recorded that Croc Gar, a mighty Saurus leader, has personally delivered the killing strike to over 1,000 Skaven warlords since the rise of Sotek. Entire temple cities would turn out to watch the sacrifice of an important Skaven commander. The vast plazas filling with clamorous skinks. For the most part, the inscrutable Slan mage priests leave such barbaric practices alone, although they could no longer ignore the populous rise of the new god Sotek, nor could they rein in the base practice of offering up sacrifices to attract the blessings of the gods. So, yeah, you can see pretty crazy stuff. So, I'm just going to list out a few of the old ones. The ones that are known very well are Sotek, which is the serpent god, which is the new one that we just discussed, who was brought up by Tenten, which is the prophet of Sotek. We have Chotek, the lord of the sun. We have Itzel, god of cold-blooded beasts. Topok, the inscrutable, god of magic and wisdom. Zolanka, the lost one. And Quetzal, the protector or warrior defender. Then there's a bunch more that not much is known other than what god they are and what their name is. Huanchi, the jaguar god of the earth and night. Zunki, lord of water, agility, and keen eyesight. Oh, by the way, I'm not pronouncing these right, probably these South American type names. These ancient Mayan or Aztec, whatever names. We have Zotl, the chooser of those destined for greatness. Quetli, oh gosh, warrior god. Tlanska, oh gosh, the embodiment of the warlike nature of the Lizardmen. Tlazcotl, the impassive, patient, and determined. Tzkaltli, he who grants strength to a warrior's arm. Potek, he who wards against the supernatural. Uxmak, the messenger of the gods. Zepidi, whose name is invoked before vengeance is called upon a foe. Zoka, the spirit of stone. Rig, the outcast. And Uxmak, the messenger of the gods. And then there's 4 more that are known by name only. There is no title for them. Kolnaxa, Inhalmex, Yuxa, and Quaddle. So yeah, that was us talking about religion. So now we get to move on to the roster. So of course you can see on the screen the roster that I believe will be for Total War Warhammer. So for the legendaries, we're not going to go into detail just yet, but we have Croc Gar and Lord Maz Mundy. And Tenten. I added this guy in last minute because after just reading about his stuff, I believe that it would be interesting. Although, this is just my opinion. I think in the lore he's been dead for a while, but who knows? They might do it because he's a really important skink character. So there might be that, or they could go for Tedo Echo. I don't know. That's the thing. It's just like the Skaven, guys. If you have an opinion on who you think should be legendary lords, please be sure to leave it down in the comments below. I believe Maz Mundy is going to be the faction leader, as he is the oldest living Slann. So that's what I think. But my choices are Croc Gar for melee, Lord Maz Mundy for magic, and Tenten for magic as well. So that's that. So for lords, we have Saurus Old Bloods. Now these are just really old generations of Saurus that have been, well, they've just been alive long enough to become the rulers. Basically, they're countless centuries years old, because none have been known to die of old age. So they're literally really old. So these would be the leaders of Saurus legions, and they'll just be absolute powerhouses. These guys, these Saurus warriors are absolute beasts. They can take on many opponents. So it's going to be really cool to see them. And then for the other lord, we have Slann Mage Priests, and these are the big toad-like guys. The Slann are big toad-like creatures that are literally the best magic casters in Warhammer. Even the lowest of Slann can go up there with the best of other races, maybe except for the highest archmages of the High Elves. That's probably the only one that can match with them, and that's against the Slann Mage Priest. All the actual Slann characters, don't even try to bother beating them in magic, because you just won't. So we move on to heroes. We have the Scar Veteran, which is just a step below the Saurus Old Blood. These would be his lieutenants, basically, so they would help him out in leading the legions and leading units of Saurus. So there's that. He'll probably act like a veteran. Well, the Scar Veteran, he'll act like a veteran from other Total War games, I would imagine. We have the Skink Chief, which is basically the same thing as the Scar Veteran, only for Skinks. He'll be there raising the morale of them, training them, making them just more ferocious on the battlefield, because Skinks are a little bit cowardly compared to the Saurus, but the Saurus are so single-minded in war that they're almost unbreakable, but Skinks are a little more cowardly than that. But the Skink Chief will definitely keep your Skink units around. And then we have the Skink Priest, which is just a hero level caster, and it's just a skink that has magical abilities, essentially. He has access to heavens and beasts, I believe, and the Slann has access to all 8 magical lores and the high magic lore, which usually only the High Elves have, but the Slann actually have access to it as well, and they have their own special spells that go on top of that as well, so very interesting. So now we move on to melee infantry. So first we have the Saurus Warriors. Now the Saurus Warriors come in hand weapon or spears, so there's going to be 2 units of them, supposedly. And the Saurus are just the main fighting force of the Lizardmen. You can find them in legions or cohorts, and these are just absolute killing machines. If they don't have their weapons, they're just going to use their claws and teeth. These guys are literally dinosaurs, guys. Like, it's walking dinosaurs, essentially. Walking dinosaurs, what am I saying? Not humanoid, but you know what I mean. Like that humanoid dinosaurs things. I don't know. Lizardmen. Haha. But these are your core warriors. So most of your armies are going to be made up of them. So supporting them are the Skink cohort. And these are the melee version of the Skinks. There are 2 more units of Skinks, as we'll get to them soon. Don't expect these guys to really do much. They'll form up into a tighter formation and pretty much just plug gaps in the Saurus warrior lines. That's pretty much what they're for, and maybe as a flanking force. So not much there. Skinks are not the strongest force in the game, that's for sure. And then we move on to the most elite infantry that the Lizardmen have, the Temple Guard. Now these are the personal guards of the Slann, basically, and other priests and such. You'll see that when the Slann go to war, they float upon palanquins. Is that what it's called, palanquin? I think so. They'll float upon those in the middle of a unit of Temple Guard. The Temple Guard's sole purpose is to protect the Slann, but of course, in Total War, they'll be their own unit, of course. They'll be the elite infantry, and they have halberds, so you can imagine that they're going to be absolutely devastating. Take a really elite Saurus and give him a halberd, and he's just going to rip through anybody. It's going to be quite interesting. Then we move on to ranged infantry. So here we have the second Skink unit, which is the Skink Skirmishers. Now they're going to have either blowpipes for poisoned longer range attacks, or javelins for more armor piercing and damage and such. So they're going to be just the typical skirmishers. Think of any skirmisher from Total War. They're going to be spaced out, and they're going to have these blowpipes or javelins doing poison damage and or just armor piercing with the javelins. It's going to be really cool. And of course, there's pictures of them everywhere. All these guys are having pictures, of course, as you all are probably used to by now. And then we have a special breed, the chameleon skinks. Now, the thing that's going to be interesting about these guys is they have blowpipes, so they're going to have their poison attacks, but they're going to be basically invisible, of course, depending on where you're fighting. But actually, anywhere, really, because they are chameleons, they have the ability to go nearly invisible to the naked eye, so it's going to be pretty cool. So these guys are going to be like some of the units in maybe like Attila that can stay hidden anywhere and have the snipe ability, so they can hide and shoot while being hidden, so people won't find them. I think that's what they're going to act as, and of course their poison attacks are going to be devastating against certain units. So for monstrous infantry, we then have the Croxagores. Now the Croxagores are, as we mentioned earlier, the size of trolls or ogres. So these are just absolutely huge brutes that in a strong unit, if you charge them into most units of infantry, they're going to send them flying, and they're going to do a lot of damage. And the Croxagores' weapons, I don't know if you can see in the picture of the models, but their weapons are actually chained to their wrists, so they don't drop them basically and just use their hands, because they're so primal and crazy that if they drop their weapon, they're just going to start ripping people apart with their claws and kind of risking themselves. So they have their weapons chained onto their wrists for that reason. So these are going to be shock infantry, as I mentioned. Charge them into the front or the rear, depending on if you're holding your enemy, and they're just going to absolutely get destroyed. So then we move on to cavalry, both foot and flying cavalry. First, we have the Cold One Riders, which have hand weapons, and we have the Cold One Spears. So these are going to be your devastating. These are going to be devastating, guys. Cold Ones, not only are they going to act as cavalry, so you're charging into stuff and just sending it flying everywhere, but they're on Cold Ones, and they're raptors. They're literally big, like, raptor things. So these guys are just going to absolutely eat people up, literally. They're going to charge in. They're just going to absolutely destroy everybody. It's going to be really cool. And of course, Lizardmen on top. It's a devastating mix, basically. A Cold One is able to kill a lot of people, a lot more than a horse would. And then the rider on top is just going to be absolutely devastating as well. It's going to be really cool. So then we move on to flying cavalry, and we have Pterodon Riders. Now, these have either bolas or javelins, so these are going to be a ranged flying cavalry. The pterodons also carry stones that they can drop down. So think about the gyrocopters from the ambush at Thundering Falls, where they drop bombs. These guys are going to be able to drop stones. So that's going to be really cool. And these guys are just going to be swooping around over units, throwing their javelins, throwing bolas, dropping stones. It's going to be really cool. So then for the third and final, we have Ripperdactyl Riders. Now, Ripperdactyls are different from pterodons in the fact that they are more of a melee-focused unit. The riders do have javelins, but they also have, I think both actually have spears, but these guys have javelins. But the Ripperdactyls are more for swooping in and ripping people apart. You can see from the big mouths and their clawed feet that they swoop down, they bite and rip at people as they go down. So these guys are going to be your melee flying cavalry, whereas the pterodons will be more of a support and ranged kind of guys. So it's going to be pretty cool. Then we move on to one of the coolest sections of the Lizardmen army. We have the monsters. So first off, we have the Bastillodon, which is a big hulking beast, and these carry either the Ark of Sotek, which is a big apparatus put on the back that an endless supply of snakes pours out of and creates new units of jungle swarms, as they're called in the tabletop, which is just snakes. Or it can be mounted with the solar engine, which is a magical weapon that has a giant beam that melts flesh and even causes combustible creatures to just burst into towers of flame and just blows them up. So it's going to be really cool. And of course, as you can see from the model, the thing itself is just going to be devastating in combat. The fact that they're so armored and that they have club tails, they're just going to swing around, shooting or hitting everybody. The skinks on top are going to be throwing their javelins and hitting people and all that stuff. So they're going to be really cool to see. Next, we have the jungle swarms, as I mentioned earlier. It's literally just swarms of snakes and other jungle beasts like lizards and other poisonous things that just swarm over people and kind of bite at them and stuff. So they're going to be, I'm not quite sure if they're going to be in a game, but it would be cool, I guess, to see. Of course, I don't know. There's no confirmation on any units like that, so it's going to be interesting to see if CA actually implements them. So next we have the Stegodon and the Staggered On Ancient. Now, Stegodons are mighty beasts, and they're ancient. That have dwelt within the jungles of Lustria long before the old ones were even there. So these are an ancient species. They're bulky creatures whose heads are covered by armored crests, out of which project massive horns. So basically, they're basically Triceratops, like real Triceratops. So you can just think of them like that. Yeah, basically. In non-war times, they're used as just work machines, basically like not a bulldozer, but they smash roadways through the jungle and they drag huge blocks of stone and stuff to build the temples. And they're also used as a shock unit in times of war. If you could imagine that they charge into people and they just send them flying, basically. And they're reared by teams of skinks who stay with them throughout their lifetime. And the Stegodons grow to become very protective of the skinks. They put howdahs on the back of these guys, so think of them like elephants, basically. It's basically Lizardmen elephants, let's say that. And the skinks hurl javelins from there, and they also fire. The howdah also has 2 giant crossbows mounted to it that the skinks use. So this thing is going to be absolutely devastating. It's going to charge into people, send people flying, but at the same time, it basically has 2 ballistas on the back, and these skinks are going to be firing or throwing javelins from the back. So, oh boy. We then have ancient Stegodons, which are just old. They're thicker hides and stuff. They're a bit more calm than the other ones, so they're not so devastating on the charge, but they have access to mounting the engine of the gods, which the Lizardmen don't really know how to work them anymore, but they do know how to activate it. When the glyphs on the engine of the gods are touched in the right order, the device thrums with arcane energies. The engine of the gods has mysterious powers that can protect nearby Lizardmen or send rays to smite their foes. Even the winds of magic can be better siphoned to aid the casting of spells in the presence of such a potent apparatus. Only a handful of the engines exist, and they are hidden away in the temple vaults and only rarely brought forth. They often serve as war mounts for skink priests of great importance and are used to anchor a battle line. So yeah, skink priests will ride the ancient Stegodons into battle with the engine of the gods just to make them more powerful. So it's going to be interesting. You can see a common theme here with the Lizardmen is that magic is their thing, basically. Then for the next monster, we have the Troglodon. Now, the Troglodon is a big hulking, not a dragon. What am I saying? A big hulking, just giant dinosaur, basically. It looks a lot like a Spinosaurus, but the face is a bit different. They are cave dwellers, so they don't really have eyes. So they're blind, but they hunt using their senses. They have like little whiskers, so they're kind of like a cat. They're like a land catfish, basically. And of course, they're just like any other lizard or snake. They also use their tongue and such, but they're crazy and they're very quick. And you can see from the model, the claws on that thing would just absolutely destroy everything. And they can spit venom. So they vomit toxic bile on people. And it's acidic, basically. So it's quite devastating. And they also get mounted by skinks. So of course, yeah, they act as mounts for some skinks. So it's going to be very interesting. I'm very excited to see these guys in the game because I just want to see all these dinosaurs, basically, because who doesn't love dinosaurs? They're fucking awesome. And then next we have a split unit, which is the hunting packs, which either have a Salamander or a Razordon. So first off, we'll talk about the Salamander. So a Salamander is a giant predatory creature that stalks the swamplands and estuaries of Lustria's jungles. Propelled by 4 thickly muscled legs and a powerful tail, they are swift-moving creatures whether on land or in water. Salamanders are voracious hunters, and their favorite method of catching prey is to swiftly close the distance, moving through underbrush or even submerged underwater. Once within range, they launch a burst of highly corrosive liquid from their gullets, a substance so volatile that it bursts into flames upon contact with the air. The burning pitch-like substance sticks to victims, burning them alive whilst already beginning the digestive process. The creature's neck frills and back sails provide a cooling mechanism, ensuring the cold-blooded creature does not expire from the heat generated within its own body. So yeah, it's difficult to catch and train a salamander, but skinks known as handlers manage to do so. Using sharp-tipped jabbing spears, skink handlers goad salamanders into position and then prod them until they are angry enough to spit flames. So yeah, these guys are going to be like, think about the flame cannon from Ambush at the Thundering Falls. I would imagine that it's not so long of a range and not so fancy looking, but more of like a flamethrower. So think about a shot from a Iron Drake from Ambush at the Thundering Falls. Think of that coming out of the mouth of a giant orange lizard, basically. So this guy's going to be really good at bringing down swarm units, just breathing fire on them, just killing them pretty much instantly. So it's going to be really cool. So next we have the Razordon. Now, Barbed Razordons are covered with a profusion of great spines, hardened spikes made of bone that project menacingly out of their bodies. As a defensive protection, this razor-sharp body armor serves to deter all but the most determined of creatures. And even the most monstrous of Lustria's many apex predators will think twice before attacking a Razordon. The Razordon spines are not only a deterrent, however, they are also a deadly offensive weapon. By way of powerful muscle spasms, Razordons can discharge their spines, shooting them outwards in a deadly hail. So these ones are going to be more goaded into a melee fight against maybe like a bunch of enemies, and while they're in the fight, slashing around, killing a bunch of people, biting them, chopping them into pieces with their claws, they're also shooting out their spikes everywhere. So they're going to be racking up kills like crazy from ranged attacks, and of course just ripping people apart. So it's going to be really cool to see them. So yeah, we can just talk about mounts a little bit. So we have Karnasaurs, which are they're basically like a mix of like a T-Rex and like Albertosaurus. Is that the one I'm thinking of? I think that's a name of one, but I don't know if it's the one I'm thinking of. But either way, Karnasaurs are enormous predators that stalk the darkness of the jungles. And they are the ultimate hunters of Lustria. They are powerfully built with long muscular hind limbs and a heavy tail that is used for balance. Upon scenting prey or catching sight of even the least movement, the Karnasaur propels itself with enormous strides, moving with a surprising speed for so large a beast. The shortened forelimbs and sharp claws are ideal for locking hold of prey, allowing the Karnasaur to better line up its most destructive attack. Karnasaurs have massive jaws, their gaping mouths filled with dagger-like teeth. Their bite can hack through huge chunks of flesh on larger prey, and by twisting its thick serpentine neck, a Karnasaur can simply rip its quarry apart. So, yeah. They're pretty crazy, and Croc Gar actually has his own personal one, but we'll talk about him in a second. So, yeah, that's, there's also, of course, the Stegodons can be mounts. Pterodons can be mounts for certain people. Stuff like that. It's going to be quite interesting. So, the Two out of 3 of the legendary lords that I have mentioned have their own mount. So the first legendary lord we're going to talk about is Croc Gar. Now, Croc Gar is an ancient Saurus, the last remaining warrior from the now ruined temple city of Zoltl. The spawning that brought Croc Gar into the world produced a handful of other Saurus, each marked for greatness. In the instinctive ways of battle cunning, these warriors were unsurpassed by any of their kind, and each possessed an innate dominion over the native beasts of the jungle. Croc Gar's spawning coincided with the rearing of a brood of mighty Karnasaurs, and he claimed the largest and most ferocious of his own. So, of course, Croc Gar, as I mentioned, is getting his own Karnasaur as a mount. Croc Gar had been serving his temple city for only a few centuries when the Great Catastrophe occurred. Now, the Great Catastrophe was when the warp gates collapsed and chaos entered the world. So he's been alive for centuries. Although Croc Gar and his spawnkin fought many epic battles and destroyed entire armies of demons, the never-ending onslaught eventually caused the defenders to take refuge within their temple city of Zoltl. There, the magical barriers of the mage priest saved them for a time, but eventually collapsed. Taking advantage of a surge of uncontrolled energy, demons manifested themselves inside the temple city, butchering this land before Croc Gar could ride to their aid. So did the full power of chaos swarm over Zoltl. So yeah, he's had a little bit of an unfortunate time, basically. So he's gonna be your melee lord. He's not gonna be the faction leader. I'd leave that for Maz Mundy, unless Lord Croc somehow becomes the faction leader. Although you guys don't really know who Lord Croc is. He's the oldest Slan in existence, and his body, he's dead, but his skeleton has been formed into what's called a relic priest. So they've wrapped him in resin-covered bandages, and his spirit basically possesses his body. So he's still there, but I highly doubt he'll be the leader. Maybe later in the game you can use him. I don't know. We don't know anything about the Lizardmen for Total War. But I'm just going off what I think. If you guys, again, like I mentioned earlier, if you guys think that someone else should be a legendary lord for the Lizardmen, please be sure to leave a comment down below and let me know. But anyway, we're talking about Croc Gar. So Croc Gar is going to be your melee lord. He has access to his mount Grimlock, which is his own personal Karnasaur. You've already seen from the pictures what he looks like. And between them, they're just going to absolutely wreck everybody. It's going to be quite freaking cool, if I say so myself. Also, Croc Gar has access to a Lore of Light spell because of his magical little hand that he has. He can create a searing ball of light in the palm of his hand, which can then be directed at his enemies. So he has not a one use, but he can cast the spell Shem's Burning Gaze from his hand. So that's just a big ball of energy that he can shoot out of his hand. So it's pretty cool that he has access to one spell that makes him pretty unique. So the next legendary lord we have is Lord Maz Mundy. So he is the oldest and most powerful of the living Slan mage priests. At the dawn of creation, Lord Maz Mundy was instructed by none other than Lord Croc himself. So he is the apprentice of Lord Croc. With a matchless mind unfathomable to others, Maz Mundy is obstinate in his ways and will not be deterred from that upon which he has decided. In the last few centuries, he's become a lot more active than the other Slan. I guess he kind of realizes that the world is going to shit basically all around him, so he's actually getting into action, and he'll levitate himself up into the air so that his palanquin throne can sit atop his personal Stegodon, which is named Zlak. So both of these legendary lords have access to a named mount, which is awesome. So we're going to be seeing a Karnasaur and a Stegodon, which is going to be really cool. So Maz Mundy is of course going to be the most powerful magic caster in the entire game. Sorry. Like just reading from his part in the book here. With a flick of his wrist, Maz Mundy has smashed cities and doomed armies. His great purpose does not allow for mercy. So it's going to be crazy. Like, I don't even know how they're going to be able to really balance him. He's absolutely insane. It's going to take an entire army just to kill him, basically. Not to mention the fact that he's on a Stegodon, so it's going to be really crazy. But he's an awesome guy. It's going to be really cool to see them added. But then we move on to Tenten, and I have no idea. That's probably not Tenten. That's definitely not how it's pronounced. But it is the name of the first and greatest prophet of Sotek, which is the serpent god. And it began when he rallied the population of the disease-ridden Chakwa city, leading them out of the defiled diseased city. Before he left, he claimed two treasures, a gleaming sacrificial blade and the hidden plaque of Chakwa, which proclaimed the coming of the serpent god. He turned the plaques into a totem, and he was at the forefront of a massive skink migration, essentially, because they were all leaving the city with him. And he not purposely created the new cult of Sotek. So Sotek wasn't really much of a god until this point, and this actually brought him up to almost the popularity of a mage priest, a Slan mage priest. And basically the Slan, of course, were like, hey, excuse me, what do you think you're doing there? But in the end, he does get his wish to become he does sit up there with the Slan, but it is believed that he is dead, although maybe not dead, but you know what I mean. He's not really there anymore. But he's basically the leader of all this Skaven sacrifice. He's the one that started it, and he captures thousands of Ratmen and just sacrifices all of them to Sotek, for the promise of Sotek appearing and helping them. And the appearance of the twin-tailed comet in the skies was taken as proof of his imminent arrival. Upon the field of battle, Tenten, I don't know, attacked in the manner of his twin-tailed deity, forked assaults. The serpent strikes quickly, and so too did Tenten, focusing his army's venomous energy on the enemy's weak points. As if in answer to his many sacrifices, serpents of all varieties formed a writhing carpet at his feet. Yeah, so if you don't mount him on anything, he actually gets carried around by literally a carpet of snakes. And he can actually lead units of Jungle Swarm, which is really cool. But basically, like, it's just, he's the most unique skink character, in my opinion. Maybe other than, or maybe less so or more so than Teto Echo, which is the most powerful Slan, or the most powerful skink priest. But Tenten is just so unique that I think he deserves to be a legendary lord if they even bother with him. I'm not quite sure, but again, It would be nice. So guys, that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please be sure to leave a like and a comment down below as always. And if you're enjoying this series, make sure you're subscribed and you'll leave a like, because there's going to be more coming out every few days or weeks and whatever. This has been Overkill as always, and I'll see you next time with maybe the Dark Elves. Ooh, goodbye.